Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Larry the Cable Guy tweets, and I love this joke. This is like my favorite joke I've seen in a long time. From Larry. In high school, I knew a girl that looked like one of Charlie's Angels. I saw her yesterday at Walmart. Yikes! She now looks like the bench coach for the Anaheim Angels. I love that joke so much. Simple, funny, good premise. Larry again. Hey, just looking through old baby pictures of my kids. They're now 12 and 14. Time flies. I remember our first baby. We didn't even have a clue early on she was pregnant because I was so used to my wife throwing up after we made love. Mark Norman says, women want a man who's successful. Men want a woman who gets movie references. Mark Norman again, they say you shouldn't eat fast food, but people in the Middle Ages never had Taco Bell and they died at like 38. Conan O'Brien says, scientists say that pretty soon robots will be smarter than us. In fact, they've started building a robot that wears a mask. The Boston Globe caught up with Joe List. He said, a lot of times the industry pushes young and they want youth, but to me, the general public wants good, and good is usually 10 to 20 years in. Joe List is absolutely correct there. Joe provided a list of comedy specials that inspired him or shaped his view of stand-up. This is his list in no particular order, he says. George Carlin's Doing It Again from 1990. List said, it was pretty insane for a 9-year-old kid to be quoting George Carlin. It gave me the feeling of I'm saying something to people that they're not supposed to hear, and it felt good and exciting. Chris Rock's Bring the Pain from 96. Joe said, it just blew my mind, and this time I actually got the jokes because now I was 18. At the very end of that special, Rock walks backstage exhausted, and Joe said, I remember thinking, wow, to get a view of that feeling of killing a special like that, he must feel so good, and he should feel so good. I remember thinking I would like to experience that, feel that. He likes Patrice O'Neal's Elephant in the Room 2011. Patrice is not all that famous, and comedians loved Patrice. Patrice passed away in 2011. But, boy, comedians love Patrice O'Neal. Joe says Patrice was one of the best ever, but he doesn't claim him as an influence because nobody could really capture O'Neal's presence. Joe says Patrice just felt so natural. He seemed to never, ever write anything or record sets. He just seemed like he was doing comedy in such a different way. Brian Regan's I Walked on the Moon from 2004. Joe says it's a favorite for many reasons, because of the strong material and because it was shot at a club. Joe says, I still think comedy at a comedy club is the best. If people go watch I Walked on the Moon by Brian Regan, you will laugh harder than you've laughed in a long time. It's just a hilarious guy at a comedy club. That's what I wanted my special to be. Louis C.K. from 2008, he said, he was a Boston teenager who started out the same age in the same city, standing there in a black t-shirt saying, this is crazy, listen, something just happened. That to me was like, oh, this is what I do and what I want to do. It just felt relatable to me. That was closer to where I came from. Dave Chappelle, Kill Him Softly from 2000? Wow, 20 years goes by so quickly. Joe says, we're watching a guy get seen the way he should have been seen, him at his best. At one point, he does a joke, and a guy just stands up and high-fives him in the middle, which I always loved. Richard Pryor is live in concert from 1979. Joe says, it's the best comedian's best work. For all the praise Pryor gets as a trailblazer, people can forget how good he was at creating scenes and lacing them with punchlines. He does the thing about his heart attack, and he acts it out, and he's laying on the ground, and he's arguing with his heart, and his heart is like squeezing him, and he's like, no more pork, okay? No more pork. Nate Bagartze caught up with a Columbus Underground, and they said, most of the podcasts I listen to are hosted by comedians, so I love that you're in the mix too now. Why'd you do Nateland this summer, Nate Bagartze? Nate said, I felt like it was time with the COVID thing. I mean, I'd always thought about just going out and doing it, but then you get busy. So with COVID, I thought, well, might as well do it now. Doing it, I think it's fun to be funny. It's good to be funny. As a comedian, we do need to be funny and funny a lot. It's what helps you be funny. And during this time, this pandemic, you were having long stretches where you felt like you weren't cracking jokes or being funny. So starting this podcast was a big part of that. But it was also to do something just to give people a break. If someone does want to listen to a comedy podcast, they can have one that's not so political or topical or that talks about the world's problems. You can have one that's a break for your own mental health and just watch something else and laugh at something that's dumb and doesn't matter. That's what our podcast is. Steve Smith has used a wheelchair since birth. Steve spoke with KQED. Before the pandemic, Steve would host once a week at a local club called Punchline. His material, thanks for coming up to the stand-up comedy show. I'll be your can't stand-up comedian for the night. During his set, he said, I'll tell you, the biggest middle finger in all of society, people in wheelchairs specifically, it's outside of every elevator. It says, in case of fire, use stairs. Smith says he does not intend to speak on behalf of all people with disabilities, nor does he want to be labeled as inspirational just because he uses a wheelchair. He says inspirational is a 4-letter word for people with a disability. We're not trying to be inspirational. We're just trying to live our lives. I'll incorporate my disability into universal topics like marriage and my sobriety. He's been testing out some new material, and he said, we have one of those top-down washing machines, so I have to lift myself over the side to reach the clothes at the bottom. And last week I was flipping my laundry and I fell in. You guys know I love mocking press releases. Well, here's one from Business Wire about Trevor Noah, and I'll read it because they put out a press release and they want you to know that Elastic has added comedian host of The Daily Show, Trevor Noah, to its lineup of notable speakers at the company's Elasticon. So it's Elastic and then O-N, get it? So Elasticon? Yeah, Elasticon Global Virtual User Conference taking place October 13th to the 15th, 2020. Did you hear me do the Conan O'Brien yeah lift in there when Conan goes, hey, here's something? Yeah, I just did it. Total steal. Noah joins the roster alongside soccer star and World Cup champion Megan Rapinoe, Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian, and Elastic customers, including Audi, Cisco, Shell International, and some others. Then they have some information. This is why I included this, not to just plug, Audi. Audi, you're welcome to sponsor the show, by the way. Who? Trevor Noah, comedian and host of The Daily Show. Why? Trevor Noah has the ability to tell truths that bring people together in ways that reach across cultures, continents, and boundaries to make people laugh and encourage understanding. Elasticon Global is a worldwide event aimed to bring communities together to enable innovation and transform businesses. Adding Noah to the Elasticon Global roster enables attendees to hear from an Emmy Award-winning cultural icon to discuss important issues impacting society and business today. Who wrote that? Whoever wrote that, I kind of want to applaud you because it's such nonsense, but you did write it beautifully. I love Trevor Noah, but is he a cultural icon? Yeah. No. Michael Palin, you know him from the Monty Python Flying Circus. He spoke to New Zealand Yahoo, not regular Yahoo, New Zealand Yahoo. And he said there should be no limits to comedy. If something's funny and makes people laugh, then I'm afraid that just happens. You can't say it shouldn't be funny, stop making it funny. Any attempt by authority to say, no, you've got to make sure we're portrayed in a serious manner, it's a dangerous thing. Everybody, myself included, should be up for being laughed at or joked with. It's the responsibility of the writers, what you choose to write about, and how you choose to play it. And I think it's up to the individual writer and performer. He does not agree with comedians who try to get laughs from bullying and belittling people, but he said comedy shouldn't be stifled by decree. Does Michael Palin think PC culture can have an impact on comedy? He said, yeah, I think it can do, yes. Anything that says, well, you mustn't talk about this particular area of life, that's as wrong as saying if you're writing a novel, you shouldn't write about this kind of life. Comedy is very important, especially in a time of crisis. One needs jokes, one needs laughter, but you shouldn't stifle it by decree. You should stifle it if it's bad and nasty, and it's something that you don't want to do yourself, then stop doing it. That's your comedy news for today. If you miss me, you can listen to the new episode of the Weekly Comedy Thing on the Live by Live app. That's LiveX Live if you're trying to search for it in your app store. Free streaming radio stations there. There's music of all genres. There are several comedy streaming services, which I program myself. So if you want to hear some stand-up comedy, I will strongly recommend the Today's Comedy station on Live by Live because, it plays today's comedy, a lot of new releases there. That'll keep you kind of hip. And if you want somebody to navigate you through the comedy clips, you should check out this guy, Johnny Mac. He hosts the Weekly Comedy Thing and posts a new episode every Sunday morning. So you might want to check that out, Live by Live. Other than that, if you are 10 minutes into this podcast, you probably already figured out how to subscribe to it. So I won't bore you with that. Say hi to me on Twitter. My personal is @McDRadio, @MCDRadio, or the one for the podcast is @DCNPod, this Facebook page and all that. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.